The echo of footsteps resonated against the cold marble of the international airport. Thousands of people walked hurriedly, dragging suitcases, checking screens, lost in their own worlds. But in the midst of that organized chaos, a man stood, motionless. His hands trembled slightly as he held a white cane. His eyes, hidden behind dark glasses, did not see the frantic movement around him, but his ear caught every sigh, every fragmented conversation, every announcement lost in the air conditioning. The smell of coffee mixed with jet fuel permeated the atmosphere. His fingers squeezed the handle of the cane until his knuckles turned white. There was something in his posture that screamed silent desperation. In the distance, the sound of expensive heels approached. Confident, determined steps, accompanied by the murmur of assistance and the discreet jingle of luxury car keys. The blind man turned his head toward the sound, like an animal recognizing the presence of its prey. His lips moved, forming words. No one could hear above the airport noise. It was a plea, a prayer, a last attempt to touch something that had been lost forever. When the group of suited men walked past him, the blind man stepped forward, his voice, broken but audible, cut through the air like a knife. "Sir, please, just 5 minutes with your wife." The entire airport seemed to stop. Footsteps froze, conversations died, and in that sudden silence something was about to change forever. The man who stopped was not just anyone. Richard Steinberg, a tech industry magnate, owner of a fortune that could buy entire countries. His grey eyes, accustomed to intimidating in boardrooms, now looked with a mix of confusion and annoyance at this stranger who dared to interrupt his day. "Excuse me?" Richard's voice was dry, sharp. His 3 bodyguards had already formed a protective semicircle, but something in the blind man's expression kept them motionless. "My name is David Morales," the man whispered, taking off his dark glasses. His eyes, completely white from cataracts, gleamed with restrained tears. 3 years ago, your wife Elena and I shared something that changed my life forever." Richard's assistants exchanged nervous glances. Security protocol dictated immediately removing any stranger, especially one who mentioned Mrs. Steinberg. But there was something in David's voice that paralyzed them. "Elena saved my life," David continued, his voice trembling like the strings of a broken violin. "I'm not asking for money. I don't want anything from you. Just 5 minutes to tell her what I could never say. To thank her for what she did for a stranger who can no longer see." Richard felt the airport floor become unstable beneath his feet. Elena had died 6 months ago in a car accident. There were secrets in his wife's life that he had never discovered. Silent acts of kindness she never mentioned. "Elena is—" Richard began to speak, but the words choked in his throat like broken glass. "I know." David nodded slowly. "That's why I'm here. That's why I need those 5 minutes. Not with her, but with you." 20 meters away, Sarah Chen watched the scene with a pounding heart. A nurse at San Vicente General Hospital, she had immediately recognized David Morales' voice. For 8 months, she had witnessed a story that doctors called impossible, and that she preferred to call miraculous. Sarah remembered perfectly the night David arrived at the hospital. He had been hit by a hit-and-run driver, had suffered severe head trauma, and hopes of saving him had been lost. But then she appeared, an elegant woman with golden hair who insisted on paying all the medical expenses of a complete stranger. "I don't know this man," Elena Steinberg had said that night, "but someone must help him." Sarah had seen Elena visit David every day during his recovery. She read him books, talked to him about life, gave him hope when doctors only offered discouraging statistics. It was as if Elena had found a mission in David that filled a void in her own soul. When David lost his sight as a result of the accident, Elena did not distance herself. On the contrary, she taught him to navigate the world without eyes. Got him a job at a foundation for visually impaired people and even gave him Thor, a golden retriever guide dog. Sarah knew that Elena had never told her husband about David. Some kindnesses, she had once told her, must remain secret to preserve their purity. Now, seeing Richard Steinberg confronted by the man his wife had saved, Sarah felt she had to intervene. She approached slowly, still in her hospital uniform, ready to become the bridge between two worlds that Elena had kept separate. "Mr. Steinberg," she said softly, "allow me to tell you about the angel you had for a wife." Detective Marco Restrepo was drinking coffee in the airport cafeteria when he heard the blind man's broken voice. He almost choked on the hot liquid. That name, David Morales. He knew it very well. 3 years ago, Marco had been the lead investigator in the hit-and-run case that almost killed David. The case had been filed as unsolved, but Marco had never been able to sleep soundly since then. Something didn't add up on that rainy night. On Avenida Bolivar, security cameras showed a black Mercedes fleeing the scene, but the license plate was illegible due to mud. Witnesses described a blonde woman at the wheel, but their testimonies were contradictory. Marco had followed every lead, interrogated every possible suspect, but the case cooled down like the coffee that now trembled in his hands. What tormented him most was the visit he had received 2 weeks after the accident. An elegant, nervous woman had come to the police station asking about the man who was hit on Bolivar. She said she wanted to help the victim financially, but something about her attitude seemed strange to Marco. Now, seeing Eleanor Steinberg in the photos he had seen in society magazines, Marco felt as if a lightning bolt had struck him. It was her, the woman who had asked about David, the same one who appeared in the vague testimonies of that rainy night. Marco stood up slowly, his legs trembling. For 3 years he had searched for the culprit of the hit-and-run, and now he discovered that the culprit had been secretly caring for her victim. Guilt, redemption, genuine love. He approached the group that had formed around David and Richard, his detective badge shining on his chest. He had questions to ask, truths to discover, and perhaps justice to serve. As Richard Steinberg wrestled internally with the revelation about his wife, 2 stories began to unfold simultaneously in the corridors of the international airport. Sarah Chen gently took David's arm. "Come with me," she whispered. "There's something you need to know before you talk to him." She led him to a quieter area, near the windows overlooking the runway. There, with a choked voice, she began to tell him the secrets Elena had kept for years. "Elena not only paid your medical expenses, David, she was the one driving the car that night." The words fell like silent bombs. But she didn't flee out of cowardice. She fled because she was in a panic, because she had just received the news that she had terminal cancer. She was on her way to the hospital to confirm the results when she hit you. Meanwhile, a few meters away, Marco Restrepo had intercepted Richard. "Mr. Steinberg, I need to talk to you about your wife." His detective's voice was firm but respectful. "I believe Elena was involved in Mr. Morales' accident." Richard felt as if the world was spinning around him. "What are you saying?" "Your wife visited the police station after the accident. She wanted to help the victim. At the time, I didn't connect it, but now—" Marco looked at David, who was silently crying, as Sarah continued her story. "I believe Elena carried a guilt that led her to become the guardian angel of the person she hurt." The 2 men looked at each other, each processing a different but connected truth. Richard discovering that his wife had hidden a terrible accident, Marco finally understanding why Elena had shown so much interest in David, and David learning that his guardian angel had also been the cause of his blindness. Time was running out. Richard's flight would depart in 30 minutes, but something much more important was taking off at that airport: the truth. Richard Steinberg walked slowly towards David, who remained motionless by the window. His steps echoed like the ticking of a clock marking the end of an era of secrets. When he reached him, both men stood in silence for long seconds. "Elena told me about you," Richard lied softly, his voice broken for the first time in decades. "She told me about a brave man who found light in the darkness." David raised his head, his blind eyes searching for the direction of that voice. "Mr. Steinberg, No!" Richard interrupted him, placing a trembling hand on David's shoulder. "Let me speak first." He took a deep breath, as if about to dive into unknown waters. "Elena died taking many secrets with her. But I think you knew her heart better than I did." Tears began to stream down David's cheeks. "Your wife saved me twice. The first time when she took me to the hospital. The second when she taught me that life is worth living, even without sight." His voice trembled like a leaf in the wind. "She used to tell me that God puts angels in our path when we need them most." Richard felt as if his heart was breaking and healing at the same time. "What did you want to tell her in those 5 minutes?" "David?" "That I forgave her," David whispered, and those 3 words resonated in the airport like a symphony. "That I held no grudge for the accident, that she gave me more than she took away, and that—" his voice completely broke, "that I loved her, like one loves a mother, a sister, an angel." Richard embraced David, 2 strangers united by their love for the same extraordinary woman. In that embrace, Elena Steinberg was present once more, connecting 2 lives that fate had intertwined, in the most painful and beautiful way possible. The airport continued to function around them, but in that small corner, time had stopped to allow 2 wounded souls to heal each other. While Richard and David shared their moment of healing, Detective Marco Restrepo had rushed back to his patrol car, parked in the airport's police area. His hands trembled as he searched his phone for the number of his old partner at the police station. "Garcia, it's Marco. I need you to check the Morales case file, the hit and run from 3 years ago. Yes, the archived one." His voice was urgent, desperate. "Look for any evidence we might have overlooked. DNA, fabric fibers, anything from the black Mercedes." While he waited, Marco remembered something he had forgotten for years. At the accident scene, they had found a small fragment of glass that didn't belong to any of the damaged cars. It was high-quality crystal, possibly from a glass or a vase. They had never given it importance because it seemed coincidental. His phone rang. "Marco, I found something strange. There was a note in the file that we never fully processed. A woman called 3 days after the accident, saying she wanted to confess something, but she hung up before giving her name." Marco's heart raced. "Was the call recorded?" "Yes, but the quality is terrible. You can only hear a woman crying and saying something about not being able to live with this." Marco ran back to the airport, but when he arrived at the area where he had left Richard and David, he was met with a scene that paralyzed him. The 2 men were sitting on a bench, Richard holding a yellowed envelope that appeared to have been recently opened. "Detective," Richard called calmly, "I think this belongs to you." He handed him the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in Elena's elegant script to the detective investigating David Morales' case. "It was I who hit him. I cannot live with this secret, but neither can I abandon the person I hurt. When you read this, I hope I have found a way to make peace with my conscience." The confession had existed all along, kept in Elena's personal bag, waiting for the right moment to come to light. Detective Marco Restrepo held Elena's letter in his hands as if it were a sacred object. 3 years of insomnia, unsolved cases, and tormenting questions vanished with those lines written in blue ink. But now he faced a dilemma that had not been taught in the academy. Technically, he murmured, more to himself than to Richard and David, I should open a formal investigation, report this to the prosecutor's office, process the case, even if the person responsible has passed away. Richard looked up, his business eyes now softened by pain and understanding. And what would we gain from that, detective? Marco looked at David, who remained silent, his face serene despite the revelations. Mr. Morales, you are the victim. Here, legally, you have the right for this to be processed, for official justice to be served. David smiled for the first time in the entire conversation. A sad smile, but full of peace. Detective, do you know the last thing Elena told me before she died? Marco shook his head. She told me, David, true justice doesn't always come from the courts. Sometimes it comes from forgiveness, from the opportunity to turn pain into love. David slowly straightened up, leaning on his cane. She already paid her penance. She paid with every hospital visit, with every penny she spent on my recovery, with every night she surely cried over what she had done. Marco felt a lump in his throat. In 25 years of his career, he had seen justice served in cold courtrooms, but he had never witnessed justice served by the human heart. Slowly, he folded the letter and returned it to Richard. I believe this case, he said firmly, was already resolved 3 years ago, just not in the way we expected. Sarah Chen, who had observed the entire scene in silence, approached the group. There's something else you should know, she said softly. Elena left specific instructions about what to do if the truth ever came out. Sarah Chen took a sealed envelope from her bag that she had kept for 6 months since Elena's death. With trembling hands, she broke the red wax seal engraved with the initials E.S. Elena gave me this the day before her accident, she explained, in a broken voice. She told me to only open it if Richard and David ever met, and if the truth came to light. Inside the envelope were 3 documents that would change everything forever. The first was a private will, where Eleanor allocated $5 million to create the David Morales Foundation for people with visual impairment. The second was a letter addressed specifically to her husband, and the third was a complete confession of the accident, but with details no one knew. Richard, Sarah whispered, she wanted you to know that that night she wasn't just going to the hospital for cancer results. She was going because she had decided to tell you about her illness. She was so nervous, so scared of losing you, that she lost control of the car when she saw the positive result on her phone. Richard read Elena's letter with tears streaming down his cheeks. Every word was a farewell, every phrase a declaration of eternal love. My love, if you are reading this, it means my secret has come to light. I didn't want to hide it from you out of malice, but because I needed to find a way to redeem myself. Before I left, David taught me that angels sometimes come disguised as victims, and that forgiveness can heal wounds that medicine cannot touch. David, who had been listening in silence, approached Richard. Mr. Steinberg, there's something Elena asked me to tell you if we ever met. What was it? Richard asked, his voice barely audible. That you were the love of her life, but that helping me gave her a purpose that made her feel worthy of that love. And that, David paused, searching for the exact words, that she hopes you can love her even knowing her imperfections. Richard embraced David once more, but this time the embrace was different. It was not just solace, but acceptance. Acceptance that Elena had been human, imperfect, but extraordinarily capable of turning a mistake into an act of infinite love. Detective Marco officially closed the case in his mind, not in the files, but in his heart. He had found something more valuable than legal justice. He had found human justice, a legacy of love and redemption. 6 months later, at the same airport where it all began, the first branch of the David Morales Foundation was inaugurated. Richard Steinberg cut the ribbon alongside David, while Sarah Chen and Detective Marco Restrepo watched from the front row. On the main wall of the building, a golden plaque was engraved with a quote from Elena: "Angels don't always have wings, sometimes they have scars." The story of Elena, Richard and David spread throughout the country like a wildfire of hope. Media outlets, social networks, documentaries, everyone wanted to tell the story of the woman who turned her worst mistake into her greatest act of love. But beyond the media fame, something deeper had occurred. David had become the Foundation's director, helping hundreds of visually impaired people find purpose and hope. Richard had left part of his business empire to dedicate himself to charity work, following the silent example Elena had given him for years without him realizing it. Sarah Chen changed jobs and joined the foundation as medical coordinator, because she had learned that healing goes beyond curing physical wounds. And Marco Restrepo, after 25 years as a detective, discovered that true justice is not always found in courtrooms, but in the human capacity to transform pain into love. The question Elena had planted in their lives continued to resonate. How many times have we walked alongside angels without recognizing them? How many opportunities for redemption have we lost because we prefer to judge rather than understand? In a world where news is filled with hatred and division, Elena Steinberg's story reminds us that the greatest miracles happen when we choose love over pain, when we decide to build bridges instead of walls, when we understand that true wealth is not measured in bank accounts, but in lives touched by compassion. And you, who have heard this story, how many Davids have you met without realizing it? How many Elenas walk among us, carrying secrets that could transform into acts of infinite love? The airport of life is full of encounters waiting to happen. We only need 5 minutes of courage to change a story forever.